Hello, friends. Today I'm back again with a new story. Today I'll be reading The Address by Marga Minko. This is a short story about a daughter who goes in search of her mother's belongings after the war in Holland. When she finds them, the objects evoke memories of her earlier life. However, she decides to leave them all behind and resolves to move on. Welcome, friends. This is a short introduction to the story The Address by Marka Minko. For the students who study in CBSE schools, class 11, this is a part of their English course syllabus. Friends, this is Stories by Ritu, and the story of The Address begins with a victim of war going back to her native place. It is about a daughter who returns to her home in Holland. She goes there in search of her mother's belongings after the war. When she reaches the native place, she does not receive a warm welcome. She follows the address she has on her, but she is not recognized by the owner. When we read the address, we learn about the intricate emotions of humans like trust, hope, betrayal, as well as the ill effects of war upon human beings. Here we have The Address by the Dutch writer Marga Minko. "Do you still know me?" I asked. The woman looked at me searchingly. She had opened the door a chink. I came closer and stood on the step. "No, I don't know you." "I'm Mrs. S.'s daughter." She held her hand on the door as though she wanted to prevent it opening any further. Her face gave absolutely no sign of recognition. She kept staring at me in silence. Perhaps I was mistaken, I thought. Perhaps it isn't her. I had seen her only once, fleetingly, and that was years ago. It was most probable that I had rung the wrong bell. The woman let go of the door and stepped to the side. She was wearing my mother's green knitted cardigan. The wooden buttons were rather pale from washing. She saw that I was looking at the cardigan and half hid herself again behind the door. But I knew that I was right. "Well, you knew my mother?" I asked. "Have you come back?" said the woman. I thought that no one had come back. "Only me," I replied. A door opened and closed in the passage behind her. A musty smell emerged. "I regret I cannot do anything for you." "I have come here specially on the train. I wanted to talk to you for a moment," I said. "It's not convenient for me now," said the woman. "I can't see you. Another time." She nodded and cautiously closed the door, as though no one inside the house should be disturbed. I stood where I was on the step. The curtain in front of the bay window moved. Someone stared at me and then would have asked what I wanted. "Oh, nothing," the woman would have said. It was nothing. I looked at the nameplate again. "Dorling," it said, in black letters on white enamel. And on the jamb, a little bit higher, the number 46. As I walked back slowly to the station, I thought about my mother, who had given me the address years ago. It had been in the first half of the war. I was home for a few days, and it struck me immediately that something or other about the rooms had changed. I missed various things. My mother was surprised I should have noticed so quickly. Then she told me about Mrs. Darling. I had never heard of her, but apparently she was an old acquaintance of my mother, whom she hadn't seen for several years. Suddenly, she had turned up and renewed their contact. Since then, she had come regularly. Every time she leaves here, she takes something home with her, said my mother. She took all the table silver in one go, and then the antique plates that hung there. She had trouble lugging those large vases, and I'm worried she got a crick in her back from the crockery. My mother shook her head pityingly. I would have never dared ask her. She suggested it to me herself. She even insisted. She wanted to save all my nice things. If we have to live here, we shall lose everything, she says. Have you agreed with her that she should keep everything? I asked. As if that is necessary, my mother cried. It would simply be an insult to talk like that. And think about the risk she is running each time she goes out of our door with a suitcase full or bag. My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. She looked at me reprovingly, and after that we spoke no more about it. While I was thinking, I had arrived at the station without having paid much attention to things on the way. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war. But I didn't want to go further than was necessary. I didn't want to upset myself with the sight of streets and houses full of memories from a precious time. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Darling in front of me again, as I had the first time I met her. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her. I had got up late, and coming downstairs, I saw my mother about to see someone out. A woman with a broad back. There's my daughter, said my mother. She beckoned to me. The woman nodded and picked up the suitcase under the coat rack. She wore a brown coat and a shapeless hat. Does she live far away? I asked, seeing the difficulty she had going out of the door with the heavy case. In Marconi Street, said my mother. Number 46. Remember that. I had remembered it, but I had waited a long time to go there. Initially, after the liberation, I was absolutely not interested in all that stored stuff, and naturally, I was also afraid of it. Afraid of being confronted with things that had belonged to a connection that no longer existed, which were hidden away in cupboards and boxes and waiting in vain until they were put back in their places again, which had endured all those years because they were things. But gradually, everything became more normal again. Bread was getting to be a lighter color. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened, a room with a view. You were more used to glancing at every day. And one day I noticed I was curious about the possessions that must still be at that address. I wanted to see them, touch, remember. After my first visit, in vain, to Mrs. Darling's house, I decided to try a second time. Now, a girl of 15 opened the door to me. I asked her if her mother was home. "No," she said, "my mother's doing an errand." "No matter," I said, "I'll wait for her." I followed the girl along the passage. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. We had never used it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. "Won't you sit down?" asked the girl. She held open the door of the living room, and I went inside past her. I stopped, horrified. I was in a room I knew and I did not know. I found myself in the midst of things I did want to see again, but which oppressed me in the strange atmosphere. Or because of the tasteless way everything was arranged, because of the ugly furniture or the muggy smell that hung there. I don't know, but I scarcely dare look around me. The girl moved a chair. I sat down. And stared at the woolen tablecloth. I rubbed it. My fingers grew warm from rubbing. I followed the lines of the pattern. Somewhere on the edge, there should be a burn mark that had never been repaired. "My mother will be back soon," said the girl. "I have already made tea for her. Will you have a cup?" "Thank you," I said. I looked up. The girl put cups ready on the tea table. She had a broad back, just like her mother. She poured tea from a white pot. All it had was a gold border on the lid. I remembered. She opened a box and took some spoons out. "That's a nice box," I heard my own voice. It was a strange voice, as though each sound was different in this room. "Oh, you know about them?" She had turned around and brought me my tea. She laughed. "My mother says it's antique. We have got lots more." She pointed around the room. "See for yourself." I had no need to follow her hand. I knew which things she meant. I just looked at the still life over the tea table. As a child, I had always fancied the apple on the pewter plate. Once we even ate off the plates hanging there on the wall. I wanted to so much. But it wasn't anything special. I had found the burn mark on the tablecloth. The girl looked questioningly at me. "Yes," I said. "You get so used to touching all these lovely things in the house. You hardly look at them anymore. You only notice when something is missing, or because it has to be repaired, or you have lent it, for example." Again, I heard the unnatural sound of my voice, and I went on. "I remember my mother once asked me if I would help her polish the silver. It was a very long time ago, and I was probably bored that day, Or perhaps I had to stay at home because I was ill, as she had never asked me before. I asked her which silver she meant, and she replied, surprised, that it was the spoons, the forks, and the knives, of course. And that was the strange thing. I didn't know the cutlery we ate of every day was silver. The girl laughed again. I bet you don't know that either. I looked intently at her. What we eat with? She asked. Well, do you know? She hesitated. She walked to the sideboard and wanted to open a drawer. I'll look. It's in here. I jumped up. I was forgetting the time. I must catch my train, I said. She had her hand on the drawer. Don't you want to wait for my mother? Oh, no, I must go. I walked to the door. The girl pulled the drawer open. I can find my way out, I said. As I walked down the passage, I heard the jingling of spoons and forks. At the corner of the road, I looked at the nameplate. Marconi Street, it said. I had been at number 46. The address was correct, but now I didn't want to remember it anymore. I wouldn't go there back because the objects that are linked in your memory with the familiar life of former times instantly lose their value when, severed from them, you see them again in strange surroundings. And what would I have done with them in a small rented room where the shreds of blackout paper still hung along the windows and no more than a handful of cutlery fitted in the narrow table drawer? I resolved to forget the address. Of all the things I had to forget, that would be the easiest. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you liked listening to the story. This is one of the stories by Marga Minko. You can check out her other stories. Most of her stories deal with the World War, that is World War II, and the Holocaust that the Jews suffered during that time. And she is also a very brave writer because even though she lost most of her family members during the war, she came back stronger, she wrote about it, and let us all know about what happened during the war. So that's all for now. We'll meet again next time. This is Stories by Ritu. Thank you.